Welcome. I'm here today with Carey Evans from Relationship Audits, and you'll get to find out what they do in a minute. But what I want to talk about today is understanding your client research, and particularly specifically going and understanding what your clients are thinking about the quality of your work. And I've always been an advocate for this. And I was prompted to do this interview by my own research. Back in December, I got an independent journalist to speak to my handful of clients, and the feedback was fantastic, and I'm delighted and thankful and humbled by it. But they also gave me some really good feedback around some of the scope of what I do, some more clarity they wanted with certain things. So I learned an awful lot, even though my gut feel was pretty much what I felt was happening. It transpired was the case. It's essential to go in and ask the specific questions yourself. In anything more complex than an organization like mine, where it's me and a handful of individuals, there's more complexity in these relationships. There are agendas, there are people's own biases and prejudices that can come into play, and they all muddy the communication. So it's not normally as simple as just asking. And even in my case, I didn't ask my clients. I got someone else to ask to remove that filter. So what I've asked Carey to do, not obviously, but relationship audits are Carey will tell you what they do, but effectively they are relationship auditors. It does what it says on the tin, as Carey might say. And I think there are some tips here that we could glean from that. So it's really kind of Carey to share these with us. So first off, do you just want to tell us what relationship audits do? I think the best place to start.
Well, I think you got it in one. We do what it says on the proverbial tin. We audit relationships. And by that, I mean that we go into relationships in a far more forensic way than a traditional customer satisfaction survey, for example. And relationship audits works with people like agencies who provide services, but also those other types of service providers like law firms and accountancy firms, and we also work with other, it even works as far as construction firms, would you believe? What we do is we help them understand how things are going with their relationships with their key customers and clients, on the basis that it's very difficult to mark your own homework. And so what we do is we go in and we talk to these clients or customers, and we do that either literally talking to them via interviews, or we do it, depending on the scale, do it via an online tool that we've developed, proprietary tool that we've developed. And we also, as it happens, work for the other side of the fence. We actually work for the client companies as well and help them assess the relationships with their suppliers.
And I've never worked out if that makes you a poacher or a gamekeeper. You're definitely both.
Makes me
which
both.
Is which?
I'm a poacher with my left hand and a gamekeeper with my right hand. It's very easy. If you just remember which hand you're using.
I've always suspected that, Carey.
Yes.
Fantastic. And that's really the key, isn't it? I think this idea that you understand the client drivers and motivations and frustrations as much as the agency side. It's seen both sides as a gift for an agency.
Yeah, it is, and the other thing to say as part of this kind of reservoir, if you like, is that my own background is in the agency world. I mean, I was in the agency world for more years than I care to admit, as an account man. So I actually had to manage relationships all the time, and I started as a junior, went up to board director, and so on and so forth. So the issue is about it's about generating intelligence, really, about what's working, what's not working, what the threats are and what the opportunities are, because our goal here is to provide a positive outcome, whether that be identification and resolution of a problem or identification of an opportunity to grow the business. And so we say to our agency clients, for example, we say that we'll help them use their clients better. What I mean by that is use is an acronym, right? For understand, secure, and expand. So if you understand what's going on, it helps you secure the business. Once you've secured the business, you can look to grow the business. But you can only do that with intelligence that is actionable. Having data is not good.
Perfect. We'll come back to that. I know it's important. But what's stopping an agency do this themselves? What's stopping the account teams just feeding that back into the business?
Well, I think, as I've hinted, it's a bit like marking your own homework, right? That's point one. Really, the issue is, firstly, you need to know the right questions to ask. We spend a lot of time making sure the questions we ask get at the right kind of information. Because sometimes you might ask questions you want answers to, but it's not necessarily what the client might want to say. You might want to ask them, what do they think of your color of your shirts, right? But frankly, they're not interested in that. So there's that. And I think the other thing to think about is that it's very easy to just make sure that you ask clients, if you're doing this yourself and you don't use a third party of any kind, it's very easy to sort of say that you want to concentrate on those people where you think the relationship is good and ignore those people where the relationship is not so good.
It's human nature, isn't it?
It's human nature. And I remember once talking to the chief exec of a well-known agency that has two names that are the same on it, and both beginning with S. And we went to see him, my partner and I went to see him about a project, and he said what happens to him is that every Monday morning, they have a meeting, and he says any issues on any of the pieces of business, and they all say no, and then one by one, over Monday afternoon and Tuesday, a number of them will trek into his office and say, well, there are a couple of things that I didn't mention in the public forum, and blah, 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 which he called permafrost, right? And so there's often permafrost in an agency, and that's why people want us to come and find out what's really going on. And it's not. This is crucial. It's not about simply ambulance chasing. It's not about finding the problem so you can beat people up about it. It's about finding out whether or not what you're doing is what the client wants you to be doing in terms of expectations. So, for example, one of the questions we ask is about, the extent to which the agency delivers against the client's expectations. But before that, we ask what their expectations of the agency are. And Andy, one of the bizarre things that we found over the years is that we've done our own research and found that if you say to clients, so how many of your agencies actually ask you what your expectations of them are? Right? 61% currently, or 63, now 61, say that they don't. So clients say, no agency's ever asked me what my expectations are of them. And we all say, how on earth can you manage the business if you don't know what your expectations are?
I guess if you don't define that, then you can continue that kind of that sort of delusion mentality, which just, if you've convinced yourself something is important, you don't want to hear an alternative perspective, and I can see how that would happen. But that's success does not come that way, does it? For sure.
No.
I thought that's an interesting point. A really interesting point about not even asking clients what constitutes a successful relationship and what do you want from it.
Yeah.
There's something you mentioned to me a while ago about what people hear, what clients say, and what agencies hear. There was quite an interesting story about and I put my hand up as a former planner, about planners. Do you want to share that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
So I went to see I was commissioned by an agency, and whenever we go and talk to their clients, we get briefed first on what they think is going on in the relationship for obvious reasons. I went to see the particular client, and the individual I was speaking to had been an old client of mine in a different time period in my life. And anyway, so once we got together, sat down in the room, I started talking to him, and I went into the room with a kind of couple of points that I wanted to check out with him based on what the agency had said. And what the agency had said to me was that there was not really any issues, but there'd been a little bit of a wobble with planning at some stage, but everything was absolutely hunky-dory now, so no issues to worry about. So I went in, so we did all the kind of how are people, blah, blah, blah. And then I said to him, okay, so in one sentence, Andy, his name was Andy, common name, and he said, oh, planning. I said, is that a bit of an issue for you then, is it? And he said, you bet it is. And we've told them, and they've not done anything about it. We've taken pieces of business away from them, and they still don't seem to get it. Planning's
A classic case of a client thinking client communicating that in all probability if they're frustrated, but an agency just not hearing it, or for whatever reason not really taking it on board. And so I mean, I don't think it's essential that people use a third party, and this isn't a plug for relationship audits, although obviously relationship audits are an awesome service. If you were going to give some advice to an agency or any business about talking to their clients and really getting to the nub of the problem, so what are the killer questions, and what behaviors should they be employing on an ongoing basis anyway when trying to make sure that they understand what the clients are all about? Are there any key really useful things you could share?
Yeah, firstly, I think that and we do have a commercial model where we work with companies, not particularly agencies, but more typically law firms, where we have a commercial model whereby we train people to go and do what we do, right? So they, within an organization, they will go and talk to those clients of theirs that they don't personally get involved with. So the one thing I would say is, if you're going to talk to your clients, you can't talk to the client you work with every single day, because they won't tell you. They won't tell you the whole truth.
Yeah,
they might tell you 95% of the truth, but they won't tell you the whole truth, is our experience. And so what you need is someone else who's one stage removed to go and ask those questions.
Brilliant.
Right, that's the first bit. Second thing is, think of it, the professional services sector tend to call this kind of activities client listening. And I think there's an interesting observation in that, right? Which is, but it's got to be active listening as opposed to talking. So when you go and do this exercise, if you are doing it via an interview, the trick is to let the client say as much as they want to say, as opposed to you closing them down with questions related to what is important to you. I once had an agency say to me that they were really, and the creative director said, I really want to know what they think of our creative standards. And I said, why? And he said, because it's really important to me. Point is, you see, it wasn't really important to the client. All he wanted was the end result. Okay. So make sure that, A, you do a lot of listening and you don't do the talking. 2, make sure that your questions are, as much as you can, are open-ended. So you get the color as well as the kind of the black and the white. And make sure you check for understanding at the end of the interview. That's really, really important. Well, Mr. Client, what I've heard from you today is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Is that correct? And the final thing I think you do is you offer them the opportunity to go off the record if they want to say something off the record.
Absolutely.
And you know what is a really interesting dynamic in that, because what tends to happen is when people say, well, it's a chemistry thing, I don't think I can say. I say, fine, well, if you don't want to say it, oh, well, I'll just tell you. And once it's come out, once it's on the table running around, this issue all of a sudden becomes far less of a problem in communicating back, as long as it's done sensitively, than it was initially before it came out. It's the very act of extracting the catharsis. This little kind of it's cathartic, yeah, exactly, cathartic thing. So ask the right questions, listen a lot, open-ended questions, check for communication. Sorry, for understanding at the end of the interview, and keep it as a conversation. If you do an interview and you type the answers that people give you when you're doing it, it will fail miserably, because the best way to do this is as a conversation, but a structured conversation.
It's undoubtedly true. They talk about level 1, 2, and 3 listening, and if you're in level 1, you're sitting there waiting to give an answer. You're listening to write things down. You're annotating. You're in level 2 and level 3. You're properly listening, and on these we can record. Do it on Zoom, and you can record with permission, and then look at it afterwards.
Yeah,
I
think
is incredibly
it's interesting. But you have to, though, because we find often that once you say you're recording something, you do tend to get I think you get a less effusive response.
Okay.
You can do it over Zoom, but without recording it. That's the way I would do it personally.
Fantastic. And overlaying all of that was that really valuable tip about, has the agency ever asked you what you want from the relationship and what constitutes success? I think that's the sort of context for the entire discussion. And on the back of that, there's some really valuable information, assuming I mean, I say agency, I know you work with other businesses, but primarily my clients are service businesses and agencies.
Sure.
If they did want to talk to you about this, what, just in 60 seconds, what would be the kind of things you might help them do?
It depends. If they want us to help them understand client relationships better, then what we would do is to sit down with them, work out which clients they want to talk to, who's important. So, for example, who do you talk to at the client end? You talk to two types of people: people who can hire and fire you, and people who you operate with on a day-to-day basis. And then you decide how many people you want to talk to, and it's a simple Pareto principle. Where does 80% of your business lie, and where is the business that you think you've got opportunities with?
And you mentioned the tool that you developed.
Yeah, well, we've got two ways of doing this. We either talk to people, and what we're able to do, the great thing we can do with our interview program is that we can identify how committed the client is as opposed to how satisfied they are, which is really, really interesting. And it's absolutely cast iron that if the more committed your client are in year one, the more likely they are to repeat in year two. There's a cast iron relationship between that. We've got lots of evidence. And then the other thing that we do is an online tool, which we call Radar, Relationship Radar. And that is where the scope of the number of your clients is much bigger, or the number of individuals per client is much bigger. And that gives you a skim across the top view of what's going on. And it'll signpost potential areas of issue and where you're doing well. And then if you want to then do deep dive interviews after that, you can, or you may not do. But the other thing that's critical in all this stuff is that if you're bothered to go and ask your clients what they think and where they think you can change, or where you can think you can do better, then you have to be seen to listen. Because if you don't, they'll never do it again. And it's amazing how many people say, well, like, what's the client talking about? They don't know anything, there's no point, as I say, there's no point doing it unless you're going to act on it.
And that's a brilliant place to wrap it up, Carey. I think that take that thought away, which is, if you do ask someone their opinion, they give their opinion and they bother to share it, and then you don't appear to do anything with it at all, you've done more harm than doing nothing at all. So it's a great point. Thank you for sharing those tips. We'll put your details on here so people can contact you if they want to. And that's been
Pleasure.
Really useful. Thanks, Carey.
And if anybody does want to, I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Fabulous.